There are some cardinal rules in movies that characters should always follow. Don't go into the jungle at night alone. Don't pick up hitchhikers. And if there's a legend about a giant monster, turn the other way and run. Luckily, no one in the movies ever listens to any of these rules. But fear not, listeners, because we're going to prove to you that despite all this rule breaking, Anaconda is not that bad. Welcome one and all to It's Not That Bad, the podcast that looks for A grades in B movies. And I am super stoked about this show because we have a first-time guest joining us to dissect a movie that I'm not quite sure if I should like or not. Kind of do, kind of don't, not quite sure. Joining us for the first time from the Running Scared Jogcast, not podcast, but Jogcast, Robert Lendrum. Rob, welcome to the show. How you doing, man?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. I am super excited to talk Anaconda with you. It's one of my favorite films, period.
Now, you are very, very, very familiar with this movie. Mm-hmm. Why this film?
Oh, man. So our podcast, it's a podcast and Jogcast. We do the Jogcast, which is about running and listening to horror, that unique stuff we make. But podcast, we do review films. And the whole project started because we wanted to review Anaconda. We've been talking, me and my co-host, Jamie Roberts, shout out to Jamie. We have been talking about Anaconda since we were teenagers. We always joked, man, we got to do a DVD extra of this, of course, back in the day. Anaconda is just one of those horror movies that clicks so many of the buttons for us about why we like cheesy, bad horror movies. It's somewhat scary, not terribly scary, but it's just got such a great dynamic plot movement where it just keeps going. If you want a good horror movie, like get on a boat, go somewhere, make yourself go you're going A to B. That's the whole story. That's all you got to worry about. So it's one of those films that just like keeps moving, keeps pushing. And of course, the casting in this movie is so mind blowing. We'll of course dive into the villain, Jon Voight, because he's just chewing up this movie. He's chewing up the scenery, everything. He's just like, it's a movie, it's a transformation I've never imagined this particular actor to make. And so there's something intrinsically hilarious and great about this performance he does.
Now, I'm not going to lie. I do love me a good monster movie. You know, Godzilla movies, love them. War of the Gargantuas, all for it. Even horrible rubber suit monster movies count me in. So I was kind of stoked for this because honestly, I had never watched this film prior to preparing for this show. I just saw bad CGI snake and J-Lo and walked away. So now I've gone down this road, and we are going to as well. But before we do, it is time to take 1997's Anaconda and trailerize it. Before Bennifer, before A-Rod, and before Bennifer 2 Electric Boogaloo, Jenny from the block had to deal with a much bigger snake in 1997's Anaconda. She's Terry Flores, a documentary filmmaker looking to make it big by finding a lost tribe along the Amazon River. What she does is find a leathery snake fetishist named Saron. He's looking to strike it big and capture a giant snake worth millions, and he'll sacrifice anyone and everyone to do it. Watch as they battle the horrors delivered by the best CGI 1997 could buy and the worst accent Jon Voight could muster in this monster movie that makes asylum movies look epic. This Anaconda don't want none unless you decide not to run, hun. Jennifer Lopez stars in Anaconda. Rated PG-13 for poaching greaseballs.
Oh, that's perfect for Voight. Like, a poaching greaseball is exactly what he is.
I think so. Well, between him and Mateo and a very, very brief appearance of Danny Trejo, we hardly knew him. But this actually has quite a good cast here. This movie stars Jennifer
Amazing
Lopez.
Cast.
Right, Jennifer Lopez, Jon Voight, Ice Cube, Eric Stoltz, Jonathan Hyde, Owen Wilson, Kari Wuhrer, and Vincent Castellanos. And of course, the very short introduction of Danny Trejo. He didn't make it to the title card.
He doesn't make it, but he has a very impactful opening scene to this movie. This, like, the first scene of the movie, they go from a guy punching away to the SOS, trying to get a call in, trying to get some help. We get the POV of the snake is somewhere in the water outside, and he knows something's up. He tries to get to a higher level, and this snake breaks through you don't see it, but like you're seeing all these little moments. You realize it's how big this thing is without seeing it. He breaks through the bottom of the boat ship. He climbs up to the top of what is it, a flagpole or a mast? It's shaped like a cross.
It looks like a mast, yeah.
Yeah, and he chooses gun to the head instead of being eaten by the snake. That's how the first scene ends. It's such a...
Now, is he choosing gun to the head because he doesn't want to be eaten by the snake, or is he choosing gun to the head because he doesn't want to hear John Voight's accent?
Because he doesn't want to hear Voight complain about how he missed his opportunity with the snake either.
Okay, but the funny thing is there is an almost starring list for this film, and there are a ton of names for this. We're going to start with Terry, as played by J-Lo, and I'm going to run through some of these here, and I'm going to see how you feel about these. Apparently, actresses who turned down the role, Gillian Anderson and Juliana Margulies.
I read about Anderson. I think she conflicted with X-Files, right? She just couldn't do it. And I don't know. So I keep thinking about like, what is the weight of the actor, right? When you think about what would Gillian Anderson bring to this? And I think she would have brought a lot more, not necessarily a lot more seriousness, because I don't think J-Lo plays this comedically whatsoever. She's dealing with like what's happening.
She's actually acting.
She's acting. Yeah. I think she's pretty good in this movie. She doesn't really like have to do anything that's tremendously difficult, but she does have to negotiate this guy who's basically slowly trying to take control of her boat. Scene after scene, there's a little bit of power that slips away from her and slips away from her crew. And she's constantly trying to figure, okay, what's my best move here? And she's losing all the time, but she keeps thinking, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What would Gillian Anderson have done? I don't know. I think she could have maybe brought that character to the forefront a little more, but the movie kind of gives J-Lo at the forefront more power, and then at the end she kind of comes back again. There's a kind of a dip in the middle where she loses it to Cerrone for a while. I don't know. What do you think? I don't know. What do you think?
I'm not quite sure about Gillian Anderson and Juliana Margulies. I don't hate that idea, but there's actually a list of actresses here who were under consideration, apparently. So I'm going to go through the list one by one. You say yay or nay, as in you could see them in the role. And this has nothing to do with how Jennifer Lopez played it.
Right, just if they were good.
Exactly, if you can see them fitting the role of Terry Flores. Jennifer Aniston.
No.
Kate Beckinsale.
No.
Nicole Kidman.
No.
That was a pretty darn
I just
quick
think
no.
She's almost too regal. I just don't think it would fit the role. Remember, Flores is also fresh out of school. She's like trying to become a documentary filmmaker. This is her big break. So she has to have a bit of a baby face or like innocence to her. Like,
Nicole Kidman is ageless and timeless.
I agree, but I still see her as sort of like a regal character most of the time. I don't know why. Maybe I'm just typecasting her.
Juliette Binoche.
Oh, you'd have to remind me. Who is she?
So I'm going to assume that's a no.
Yeah, I'll give her a no just for that, yeah.
Kim Basinger.
I can see that. I don't know if she would have brought anything that elevates the film, though.
And Sandra Bullock.
Wow, okay.
Keeping in mind that this is only a few years after like Fire on the Amazon
she would have fit.
And Demolition Man.
Yeah, I think she would have fit in this film. She has that edge of like she can become really tough and serious when she wants.
Yeah. Okay, so in the role of Cerrone, of course, as played by John Voight, same thing here.
Can I just check no to everybody right now? Because no one's going to beat John Voight.
There is one name on this list, and I would absolutely pay money to watch him play Cerrone. But first, Sean Connery.
Oh, man. I'm interested in that, but I still say no.
Tommy Lee Jones.
I can't see him diving to the depths of evil that he needs to be for Cerrone.
I mean, the last time we saw Tommy Lee Jones dive to the depths of evil, it was a really, really bad Two-Face.
I listened to your review on that one. And
yeah.
I wholeheartedly agree. He is just outclassed in that film. He has no business being there. The problem is he chose to play it crazy instead of playing it straight.
He made a choice.
He shouldn't have tried to go in the same lane as Jim Carrey. He should have tried to be the opposition to Jim Carrey. But Instead, it's two guys acting crazy and one guy's way crazier.
Yeah. His performance in that is, tell me you haven't watched a Batman movie or seen a Batman comic book or watched a Batman cartoon without telling me that you've ever seen, you haven't seen a Batman cartoon. John Malkovich.
Oh, man. I mean, if you could get Malkovich to do this film, that'd be the hard part.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Michael Douglas.
No.
Harrison Ford.
No.
Mel Gibson.
Well, now that we know more about him, maybe he would have fit.
But maybe a touch more. I don't know. Liam Neeson.
I can see that, but I just don't know. The thing about the Voight performance is that it edges on comedy at times, right? So that depends what part about this film you like. If you like the seriousness of it, maybe you go with, Liam Neeson or with Malkovich. But if you enjoy the comedy of the performance, which I think,
whether intentional or otherwise,
I think it's intentional, frankly, but I think it's so ripe with comedy. Like I laugh almost shot for shot sometimes in this movie of Cerrone, of John Voight. So I would say no, based on that kind of thinking.
Jack Nicholson.
Funny, I just reviewed The Fan, where Jack Nicholson apparently passed on the Robert De Niro role of Gil, and I keep thinking about that. If you have a guy, an actor who's got bigger shoes than the role, bigger feet than the role's shoes, if you follow my metaphor, sometimes it overshadows the character, and you're kind of looking at the performance, not the character. And so it would be better to watch somebody who you've never seen transform into something crazy rather than see a guy you're used to seeing play crazy and you want to know what he's going to do this time, because sometimes he just does what you've seen in other films. So I don't think Jack would have fit, because we would have just been watching Jack be silly Jack almost. Whereas Voight, we've never seen him act like this. So it's something about it is funny just because of that.
Martin Sheen.
Oh, man. I mean, the whole Apocalypse Now. So this movie has a lot of parallels to Apocalypse Now, right? The descent into the heart of darkness. Do I see him again? It's that whole thing of how serious. He's also a bit smaller, right? I liked that Cerrone was a 6'2". How big is John Voight? He seems like a big man.
Yeah,
he looks big. So Sheen, I don't know. I don't think he would quite fill the role.
And here's the one that I would actually love to see: Jean Reno.
Remind me who he is.
All you got to do is go watch Godzilla, the Matthew Broderick one.
Oh, I've seen it, but so long ago. Which one is he?
And of course, there was the Pink Panther remake that he did with Steve Martin. There is something about Jean Reno where he's able to pull off menacing, but he's able to pull off that subtle, unintentional comedy. I love me a good Jean Reno performance, and I think knowing that there's a whole lot of camp in this, I wholeheartedly subscribe to the idea of Jean Reno in the role of Cerrone. You'd probably get a better accent.
Yeah, well, yes, I think anyone could beat the accent. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, okay, the guy from The Professional.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, let me think about that one. That's interesting. He definitely would have pulled off the accent better, or he at least could have made him, I think, more convincingly made it look like he comes from the area, or at least from South America. But yeah, I haven't seen him do. Yeah, he's done a lot of comedy too, hasn't he?
Yeah.
But he always kind of isn't in comedy. He's kind of the dumb guy though when he does it. Right?
No. He's more often than not he's the straight guy.
Okay.
And let someone like a Steve Martin or a Matthew Broderick kind of take that lead
Right.
as far as the fun side goes. Jean Reno, I think, would have killed it in that role. In the role of Denise, is played by Kari Wuhrer. Apparently, Gillian Anderson auditioned for that role.
She would have been too good of it. Kari Wuhrer was a choice, I think, because a lot of horror movies in the 90s, you want a little sexy lady in one of your roles, and Kari was kind of at her peak at that point. She'd been in a few things. Mm-hmm. Now, she does have kind of a descent into madness as well, so do you need a better actor not hate to say that about Kari, but Gillian Anderson is definitely an A+ actress. Would she have been able to like pull off that descent a little better? Probably.
But again, here's the list of actresses who were considered. Annette Bening.
I don't know. No. Too again, Carrie's supposed to be younger, feels a little fresh out of school, a little green in terms of her work. She's obviously in the business, but none of them are like pros yet, right? Like established. So
Cameron Diaz.
Yeah, I can see it.
Keep in mind, this is 1997 Cameron Diaz.
Yeah, I think your budget goes up. Yeah, but she still's done what by then? She's done The Mask yet?
You know what? I think she's done The Mask by this point, but this is pre-Charlie's Angels, though.
And Something About Mary is 98?
I think so. So this is before she really exploded. I mean, yes, she got a lot of attention for The Mask,
right.
And I think it's probably why they considered her for this. Terry Hatcher.
Oh, see, ask 1990 or 96 Rob, who was in love with Terry Hatcher in that show, like Superman show. I used to love Terry Hatcher. So I would have said yes. And her and Carrie Ward don't look totally dissimilar. Like they have some features that look alike.
It's not a far stretch. Gwyneth Paltrow.
I think you don't need to go that big of a A-list actress for that role.
Winona Ryder.
Oh, that would have been cool.
Yeah.
Again, she kind of looks like Carrie.
And then there's in the role of Warren Westridge.
Oh, man, Westridge is so good.
Apparently, F. Murray Abraham, the voice of Khonshu himself, turned down the role, but they were also considering Tim Curry. And this is one of those situations where I completely agree with you that if it was Tim Curry in that role, the feet are bigger than the shoes.
Yeah. And I honestly, I forget the actor's name now. Sorry, who's Westridge? What's his name?
That would be Jonathan Hyde.
Jonathan Hyde, yeah. Jonathan Hyde is so, like, he plays, I think, this perfectly. He's a bit comical, like, comic-y in the sense that, like, line for line, his delivery is very, like, thought out. You know he's going to go big or he's going to go small in this line, but he fits it so well. Like, by the end, you actually grow to love him, even though you hate him at the beginning. Like, there's something fun about his transformation, too.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is the one that blew my mind. All right. Up to this point, there've been some interesting considerations, and you sit there and go, okay, I could see or I might not see. The role of Danny is played by Ice Cube. Mm-hmm. Was originally offered to Chris Farley. Chris Farley. He's in a boat down the river, Chris Farley, and he couldn't do it because of freaking Beverly Hills Ninja. What? How do you go from Chris Farley to Ice Cube?
Oh my gosh, I would love to see this movie with Chris Farley in it. And I love Ice Cube in this movie, but to think that Chris Farley playing that role, the funny part, the hardest part thing about that is, remember, in this film, unlike a lot of horror movies, especially 90s, you've got a Latina lead, you've got the co-star is black, and they're the two survivors of this, the three survivors. Two of the three survivors are of color. Mm-hmm. So if you put in Chris Farley, are you more tempted to kill him? Or are you like, is he still going to be the hero? Can that actor be the hero?
It just tells me, like, and when you take a look at some of the actors that they're looking at for these roles, I think you're right. I think comedy was the intention
there's a
this.
Thought. Yeah, you're right. They were trying to find that comedy. Where is it going to come from?
Yeah, which makes all of a sudden some of the more serious performances. Did they understand the assignment?
Yeah, or did they even tell them, like? I love this idea that the director was like, no, you're really serious. This is really important. But then to the other actor being like, yeah, just go crazy.
I love the fact that you brought up the director. This movie is directed by Luis Loza. Mm-hmm. This would be the last North American theatrical release that he would ever direct. He also directed Sniper, Fire on the Amazon, and The Specialist. In 2005, he did direct a movie called The Feast of the Goat that never saw a theatrical release here. Mm-hmm. But yeah, this was his North American theatrical swan song.
It's too bad. You look at the money it made, though, based on its budget. This movie did really well.
I wonder, though, how much of that budget is a combination of J-Lo and her star starting to rise, or the fact that people are going, you got to watch this movie. You're not going to believe frickin' John Voight in this.
Well, also remember, the snake is CGI in 97 and animatronic. It's both. And the animatronic costs a fortune to make. This is a massive robot snake that almost killed J-Lo and Ice Cube at one point.
We came so close. Yeah. We came so close. Unfortunately, this film was highly panned. Mm-hmm. At the Razzies that year, this was nominated for Worst Picture. It lost to The Postman. John Voight was nominated for Worst Actor. He lost to Kevin Costner in The Postman.
Oh, come on.
For Worst Screen Couple, Jon Voight and the Anaconda were nominated. They lost to Dennis Rodman and Jean-Claude Van Damme in Double Team.
Wait, J-Lo and Eric Stoltz didn't make that category? Because
No.
that's another bad couple.
Luis Loza was nominated for Worst Director. He lost to Kevin Costner for The Postman, which I'm starting to think that Anaconda needed to send a thank you note to Kevin Costner for really messing up. And, of course, the film was nominated for Worst Screenplay. It lost to The Postman. I feel like I'm repeating myself here, but it doesn't end there. At the Stinkers Bad Movie Awards that year, this film was given a dishonorable mention for Worst Film. The winner that year was Batman and Robin.
Well, same year. All right.
Right.
We're back to that.
Jon Voight won the Stinkers Bad Movie Awards for Worst Supporting Actor and won for Most Annoying Fake Accent. Now, at the Fangoria Chainsaw Awards, this film was nominated for Worst Film. It lost to Spawn.
Oh, Spawn had some bad CGI in Spawn. Remember the devil?
Oh,
Like a video game.
Spawn had potential.
Yeah,
It
the
did.
comic and the MTV cartoon were amazing.
Oh god, the HBO animated series, I love
was
that
it HBO?
one.
I thought wasn't it aired on MTV?
It was HBO.
Oh, that was wrong.
I remember because I had the VHS tape, and every time I put it on, it did.
Yeah, it was great.
But interestingly enough, at the Saturn Awards that year, J-Lo was nominated for Best Actress. She lost to Jodie Foster in Contact, and it was nominated for Best Horror Film. It lost to The Devil's Advocate.
Devil's Advocate. Is that the
That's the Keanu Reeves and Al Pacino. Yep.
Yep. I remember how it ends.
Now, also at the 2016 All Deaf Awards.
2016.
Yes. Ice Cube was given an award for Best Black Survivor in a Horror Film.
Yeah, that's what I'm
which
saying.
Love it. But you mentioned money, and this movie made bank. This film had a budget of $45 million and had a domestic gross of $65 million and a worldwide gross of $136 million. Spent 2 weeks at number one. That's because it debuted on the April 11th, 1997 weekend. Also debuting that weekend were Grosse Point Blank, which debuted at number 4. This movie knocked out Liar Liar, which was sitting at number 1. But the critics, though.
Yeah, critics didn't like it.
The reason why we're here. Over at Metacritic, this film has a Metascore of 37. And then at Rotten Tomatoes, it has a tomatometer of 40% and an audience score of 24.
That perplexes me because Anaconda also has a cult following. People love to make fun of it and go on YouTube. People have sampled it. They've made jokes about it. But like, there is a following of people who really like this movie.
I'm starting
Me
to
being
think
one of them.
I'm starting to think that this film is the John Scott of horror movies, in that it gets to the All-Star game, but the critics really, really don't like it, and the audience is in there going, "What the hell are we doing here?" But let's figure out why this film is actually good. Ratings be damned here. We're going to start with Jennifer Lopez, of course, who plays Terry Flores. How was J-Lo in this for you?
I think she's fine. People, this is only her third big movie, I believe, at this point in her career. And I mean, she isn't asked to do a lot, but she's asked to be stoic, somewhat flirtatious here and there. She has to do it fake. She has to put it on once where she's trying to like fake seduce Cerrone. And then she has to survive and then like run on her feet and, you know, outwit him to a certain degree. So I think it's really interesting because she's also the character somewhat in power. Like at the very beginning of the movie, Mateo calls her Chefe because she's the director of the film. So there's this interesting power dynamic that she has that Cerrone is slowly trying to pull away from her. And I find like she has to negotiate that, and her and Cube are kind of always on the side trying to figure out, okay, what do we do next? I never found her hard to believe or out of place. And I thought she's fine. Like I don't really have any problems with her performance in this movie at all. I think she's pretty good.
I'm not going to lie. You know, obviously when people think of J-Lo, the first thing that's going to come to mind is Gigli, right? It's bound to happen.
Always in bad films?
Well, it's just films, period, right? Like you think J-Lo, the first thing you're going to think, you know, maybe Made in Manhattan, but Gigli will be the first one, and then Jersey Girl will probably be the second one after that. But in this, I wasn't expecting her to be in a role like this, right? To me, she screams rom-com.
Right.
Right. That seems to be her strength. Here, I was actually surprised by how how good she actually was in this. I will say though, and this is probably the writing per se, in that here's someone who's made it to the point where she's directing her own movie and brave enough to go down the Amazon River to find this tribe. And that confidence seems to go away throughout.
Yes.
It does come back here and there. But also, for the record, this film is over a quarter of a century years old. So if you haven't seen it by now, that's on you guys.
Oh, yeah. Spoiler.
Right.
We're going to tell you exactly what happens.
Straight spoilers all through this show. It's one of those things where she's not the one I expect to pull the seduction attempt on Cerrone. I can't remember if Denise is dead by this point or not.
Or she's shattered mentally. I agree. And I think that's actually, to me, I thought that was a strength because I was like, oh, J-Lo's going to have to do it now. Because Carrie Werher's character, my mind at this point is shattered from watching her boyfriend get eaten by an anaconda. And so it's up to J-Lo to sort of try this thing. Plus, she's already caught Cerrone a few times now, leering at her with this look on his face.
Oh, he's leering at everybody at this point.
But there's two scenes specifically where they just shoot him staring at her for like an obscenely long time, just with this you have to see this grimace to understand why it's so funny to me. But like it's like a smile on Ronald McDonald turned completely upside down and then like a sharp edge in his teeth, his upper teeth showing, and he's squinting his eyes at her with his head slightly cocked back. And he's just leering at her whenever she does anything, like just trying to tie her hair back. And she looks up and there's this guy just eyeballing her from a distance and not breaking eye contact, just continuing to leer the whole time. So, yeah, she has to she knows, okay, I think he's attracted to me. Let's see if I can use it to my advantage. Yeah, I think you're right. You're seeing her confidence dip, but Cerrone is playing checkers here, or chess, not checkers. He keeps cornering her into problems where she doesn't really have a choice but to kind of follow along with what he's putting in front of her.
And I mean, at first, of course, here's a guy who seemingly knows the Amazon at this point, but to the same time, why would she trust anyone aside from Dr. Kale, right, who she knows, who clearly she's had a romantic relationship with in the past? She knows him. She knows that he knows the river, right? Like, why would you trust anybody else, especially some greasy, old man ponytail that's stuck on a branch?
Well, Kale's knocked out at this point, remember? So she can't consult him at this point.
No. Kale was still conscious when they picked Cerrone up.
Yes, when they picked him up.
Yeah.
But he's gone, I think, in the next scene or two scenes later. He's KO'd for most of the movie. By the way, did you not catch the subtext that maybe Dr. Kale is J-Lo's old professor?
I never thought old professor kind of thing. I mean, obviously there's zero question that there's a romantic past. The professor angle I never really suspected, but now that you say
I think it might be there. I'm a little creeped out by it the more I thought about it. Because he hires her to do her first film, and they had some sort of romantic relationship. She came out of school. Obviously, anthropology was probably something she studied because what she's doing, and he's the teacher. It just occurred to me this could be a creepy situation.
Right. But I mean, surprisingly, if you're going there expecting Jenny from the Block, don't.
No.
That's not what you're going to get. You're not going to get glamorous J-Lo, and I think that's a strength to her performance in this.
Yeah, she puts in a serious performance. She's not doing what Jon Voight's doing.
Which is probably where the disconnect is at this point. But let's move on to Ice Cube, who plays Danny Rich. How was he for you?
So it's funny about Danny is that he doesn't really emerge as an interesting character until more than halfway through the film. At the beginning, he's just sort of playing Ice Cube. He's just a guy, and he's a cameraman, and he's there to shoot the doc. And besides doing his kind of bravado thing, he's not doing much. He's supporting her, though. The first line he says in the movie is actually one of his songs, which I think is hilarious. It's like a plug for his own album. But then he's there to support his friend, Flores, who has hired him on in her first directorial role. So I love how that bond was actually immediately cemented and that their relationship was platonic and they're friends and they're supporting each other because by the end, that's going to be really important.
You know what's funny? Not necessarily the relationship between Danny and Terry. That's not what sold it for me. It's the relationship between him and Warren.
Oh, Westerns, yeah.
Because at first they're very adversarial in that, he's trying to do his golfing kind of thing, and while Ice Cube is listening to rap.
Listen
and
to
then,
Mac 10.
Exactly. But then there's, after they think they've caught Cerrone, and, Warren teaches him how to drive the boat, and you see them actually finally finding that level of communication where they're able to connect, and the two of them all of a sudden become... you understand that relationship.
Yeah.
They're brought together by tragedy, or at least by the situation that they're going through. I love how those two got together as far as being able to connect.
Yeah, and it speaks to Warren's transformation in the film. Like you hate him off the get-go. You hate him immediately. And then by the end, he's buddying up with Cube, and they're actually bonding over LA traffic and just like the lifestyle they want to get out of the rainforest and just get back to, where they're from. And they both get it, and they're both just like happy to be there. And now there is this feeling of like, oh, I think we've survived this, but of course they haven't. But
spoiler alert,
Westeros doesn't make it. But yeah, I agree. It's one of those moments in the film. I think that this is why I'm a little blown away by the screenplay being so panned, because I actually think the screenplay. I like movies where there's a destination. Like there's a lot of examples of this kind of film. And some people think that's too simple. Oh, they're on a boat and they're going A to B. It's like, yeah, but it's about the adventure on the way and how character development occurs throughout that. And this is one of those moments in the film where you actually saw some transformation in both characters.
I mean, you could easily argue like the, A to B on the river on a boat. I mean, that's Apocalypse Now, like you said. Yeah. That's Jungle Cruise. And I actually enjoyed Jungle Cruise. Like, pan it for what you will. I actually enjoyed it. It was a fun ride. And this, as far as the actual plot goes, that's not a problem with this. They're trying to find this tribe, and then at that point, they're just trying to get out of there because, like, the storyline and plot-wise, that and all the beats that go along with it, that wasn't the problem. The problem, however, might have been Cerrone as played by Jon Voight. And I need to say this before I hand it over to you here. Dear Jon Voight, Inigo Montoya called, you stole his accent, prepare to die. But how was Jon Voight as Paul Cerrone for you?
This is what makes or breaks your experience of this film. If you are on board for the lunacy of Jon Voight in this movie, it's amazing. Because, like I was saying, shot almost every time they shoot the camera, they point at him and shoot the camera, I start laughing because there's a bunch of decisions Jon Voight makes about this character. One, you're going to realize or know immediately he's not just bad, but evil. Like, evil. Like, this guy is not good. They should not pick up this hitchhiker, and you know that almost immediately, like even before he gets on the boat, because the moment he does get on the boat, he literally leaps at the guy like a tiger, like the way he jumps on the boat and he rolls. You think he's trying to kill the guy. Even his eyes light up like a maniac. So okay, this guy's bad. So that's the first thing he decides is like, this is a vaudevillian villain, over the top. Every line he says is like a one-liner. He has a nickname for Carrie Werher right away. He calls her Baby Bird every time he refers to her. So you can tell he's kind of slimy. He's got the slick back hair, but the thing about him is that the accent is so bad. But it's a face on his face. He's got a fake scar on one side of his face, and then he leers all the time, and he speaks through his teeth a lot. Like he kind of like it's like this weird choice of how he enunciates things, and because of that he's grimacing and showing his teeth all the time and squinting, and then when he does smile, it's like the evilest smile. So like it's funny because it's so ridiculous, and it's not like Arnold Schwarzenegger Batman and Robin funny. It's like it's like that times 10.
I mean, the thing with Schwarzenegger's Mr. Freeze, right, is it's just bad pun after bad pun after bad pun, and it plays on almost all these Schwarzenegger tropes, if you will, right? Like literally, like Schwarzenegger was memes before memes actually existed.
Yeah.
But the thing with Jon Voight, I mean, the fact that accent kind of goes in and out, especially near the beginning, like he was trying to figure out the accent as the movie went along, but there are some actors in here who are trying to do a serious horror movie, and he's not one of them.
No, that's a really interesting point, because I wonder how they felt about it in a way, because he's there to chew the scenery. He's there to he is peacocking all these actors in every scene in a way that they're like, I don't know what I would do either if I was an actor. Like I came to, if you came like J-Lo did with, okay, I'm going to play this character in this way, pretty serious. But then this guy, every scene he's in is so crazy over the top that it becomes a movie about the contrast between him and the rest of the film. And that's what makes him he's a bigger villain than the Snake, right? Like the Snake doesn't even matter really compared to this guy. We are way more interested in he's going to do than what the Snake's going to do. And so, yeah, it creates a weird dynamic, but I find it comical, but at the same time entertaining, because the rest of the movie keeps me on the edge of like, okay, but now what's going to happen? And it's almost like it's on purpose, that the movie itself is trying to move along seriously, but he's there to put on a different kind of show for you.
Again, it's one of those things where you take a look at some of those potential casting choices, right? If Chris Farley's in this movie, John Voight is the template for the way direction it's supposed to go.
Right.
But there's a lot of serious performances. Like, again, it's one of those things where you have, you've got Jim Carrey in Batman Forever, and that's a choice, right? But it kind of worked. It was a very Frank Gorshin-esque Riddler, and then you got Tommy Lee Jones making a definitely different choice that what should have been done.
Right.
You needed that balance, right? But here, right, while there is some levity in it, thanks to Owen Wilson and Cara Werner, and the relationship between Ice Cube and Jonathan Hyde, exactly. This is so over the top, and you have to almost go into it expecting it. And I can see this being one of those films where you walk into it, you're like, oh, it's a big Snake movie, we're gonna be fine, and then you watch this performance and go, what the hell are we doing? And then you go back into the film with the mindset that this is camp, and everyone else is playing straight person to John Voight, and then you can appreciate it a little bit more as the unintentional camp that it is.
Yeah, John Voight produces so many one-liners in this movie that everyone I know from my teenage years that knows the movie, we say them to each other now out of secondhand nature, like 10 minutes, people. 10 minutes. Doesn't matter what we're doing, it's going to be 10 minutes. Only because, he keeps coming back with these lines about like, and let's think about the character for a second. He's supposed to be he's from Paraguay. He joined the monastery to become not a monk, but a priest. He failed. He doesn't fail out of that, as he reminds us. He didn't fail out of the priesthood, but he had to go see the world. He ends up on the jungle. And they say, what do you do in the jungle, or what do you do in the river? He's like, I catch snakes for collectors. And they're like, you're a poacher. And he's like, poaching is illegal. But he doesn't say, yes, I'm a poacher, or not, I'm a poacher. He's definitely a poacher. But again, he keeps what's the word? He's showing everybody what he is, and then sort of, but they're not admitting to it.
Well, when he's not showing us, the music score is definitely telling us exactly, because that's so like, could you signal anything? Like, you might as well just put flashing font up saying he's the bad guy.
There's a scene, the very first scene you see J-Lo, she's actually working on a computer in the hotel, and they keep cutting to something outside and playing the Snakes theme, the sound, and they show movement. It turns out to just be Eric Stoltz coming to the door. It was such a weird moment of like, why are you building suspense now? Like we just had a guy commit suicide in the first scene. We don't need to go back into that already, do we? And so there is some ham-fisted music in this movie for sure.
Which you're starting your film with doom scrolling, if you will, right off the bat, and then you're killing off Danny Trejo, and then you're like, all right, now let's get to the film. We've set the stage enough. Like if they're not being subtle.
No,
this film, like John Voight's accent, is subtle like a hammer. But let's talk about Eric Stoltz, because this is an interesting performance, because I'm used to him from like Killing Zoe and Pulp Fiction. This is a much different performance from him. How is he for you?
So he comes off as this pompous guy, but he's at least self-aware, which I enjoy about him, because he does come off as like the shiny, professor. But he's there in his like Jacques Cousteau costume, which I think actually Ice Cube even says, "You look like a low budget Jacques Cousteau." And he immediately picks up something with a cigarette hanging out of his mouth and starts joking in French. And I was like, okay, so this guy kind of gets what he is, and he's aware of it and funny. The creepy part is that he might be her old professor. But then what I loved about this is like the time, he steps in early on to kind of cut Cerrone down. Cerrone is trying to tell them a story about the Shirishama, the people of the mist. And he immediately identifies, like, you're just talking, like, that could have been this other tribe. And, Cerrone's trying to play power position with him. And he's like, I hunt snakes. I know. That's his other thing. He hunts snakes, so he knows things, is one of his lines. And Stoltz comes right back at him. He's like, I locate tribes for a living. I'm very good at that. So he shuts him down, and immediately you see Cerrone pissed off. And so this power dynamic goes into play. And just when you think, okay, so Eric Stoltz is what, the White Knight of this movie? What's going to happen? Nope. Next scene, he is out. He gets knocked out, and he doesn't come back for a long time in this film.
Yeah, he's lucky he gets to sleep through the whole damn thing. But is
With a pen in his neck.
Right? Which, okay, I've used a pen to rewind a cassette. Apparently we can, use a pen to rewind his death scene. But is this not the most Kenneth Branagh performance that Eric Stoltz could have given?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like you think he's playing a type that you've seen before?
Well, it just felt very Kenneth Branagh. And I flash back to when Kenneth Branagh was in the Harry Potter series. He comes in and he's supposed to be this, professor of the dark arts, but really he doesn't know jack. It's one of those kind of performances. Mm-hmm. And I actually really kind of like it out of Eric Stoltz. Again, a bit of a left turn from what I'm used to from him.
Yeah.
But oh my goodness, like, when he's not asleep, he's actually very good. And I do love that power dynamic. And I love the fact that we never actually see how that little bug got into his rebreather.
We do find out how, though.
Oh, yeah, very easily.
It was definitely Cerrone.
Oh, there's zero question about that.
He admits to it, yeah.
But there's even this thing when Cerrone gets on the boat, like when they pick him up from the wreck, and he's playing eye tag with Mateo and Dr. Kale, and that actually gives you cause to wonder what Dr. Kale's actual motive is in all of this.
I never caught that, because I was about to say the eye tag with Mateo is, again, so blatant that
subtle like hammer.
If you didn't catch bad guy eyeing the guy who's driving your boat, right? Like that, it's one of those moments in the movie where you laugh because you're like, he's telling you he knows the boat driver. Like, come on. I never thought he was looking at Dr. Kale. So the fact that you thought for a second maybe he's looking at Dr. Kale, I never cast suspicion on Kale, so that's interesting. I didn't have that read.
I mean, it's almost like Cerrone gets on the boat and he's sizing up who's on his team and who's not, right? Who does he have to take out in order to be able to pull this off? Because, of course, he and Mateo are in cahoots the entire time. But,
I like that, because you're right. He's identifying Stoltz as the heavy, and it turns out he's not going to be. Well, or even if he is, he's not going to be the downfall, the foil of Cerrone. So it's interesting, again, and maybe we're reading this through late 2023 lens of cultural identity, but it's nice to see that the white guy was not the hero, really, and it was the Latino girl and a woman and the black man who ended up being the main stars. Because in the 90s, like, that wasn't happening.
Yes, but it could have also been Gillian Anderson and Chris Farley.
Right.
Try to picture that now. Just have that image of Gillian Anderson and Chris Farley surviving freaking John Voight.
Yeah, that is blowing my mind the more I think about that.
Let's move on to Jonathan Hyde, who of course played Warren Westridge. You liked him a lot in this.
I do. He's so funny. His first scene, he walks out and he's yelling at the boat boy with his 3 boxes of wine that he's bringing. He's chewing him out for dropping the box. He's immediately an asshole. You're coded to hate him immediately. British accent, dressed up like he's got what is it, cravat around his
he's got the cravat
on his neck. You're immediately told you're gonna hate this guy, and he's so funny. He's really the actor Jonathan Hyde is loving this role. Like, he's totally diving into the assholeness of this character, and you slowly you see him transform in front of the camera actually at one point too, which is also really fun to see, because you hate him. All of a sudden they turn the camera on. He's the narrator, and he all of a sudden has this air of authority, and he sort of calms down and becomes like what you're used to seeing in like old school documentary. And you realize, oh yeah, he's just an actor. Like, he's just putting all that on. And then of course you see him unravel as as Cerrone takes over the boat. And there's one point where Cerrone just slaps the out of him in front of everybody, and he has to bite the bullet. He has to bite his tongue here, knowing he's outclassed physically, but also he has to do it because everyone's safety is at risk here. So he bites his tongue, and he does get his shot in later with Cerrone, where he gets to club him over the head with the golf club. And so you see, and that's again where his transformation occurs again, where he starts like, okay, I'm part of the team. I'm helping them. Him and Cube start to bond. He becomes the boat driver, and he actually goes and starts helping. Like when they get in that situation where the boat gets stuck, he instead of putting up a fight, like, oh, I don't do things like that. He's actually, all right, I'll go there. You go there. We'll work together on this. So you learn to love this guy by the end of the film, which is so funny. And then his death is one of the best kills in the movie.
Which we could have had Tim Curry. But I'm happy we didn't.
Yeah, I think Tim Curry would have been too big almost, like distractingly. Like,
yeah.
I mean, I don't know. When you have a great cast, it's hard to know, because this cast I think is amazing. If you throw in someone like that, though, is it a balance? Cast is a balance. So I'm wondering, does that unbalance things? I don't know. Tim Curry's pretty great.
Tim Curry steals the scene any movie that he is in. But I love the fact that you bring up the fact that he teaches Ice Cube how to drive the boat. Now, dear listeners, if you have not watched this movie, there is a scene where Ice Cube beaches the boat.
Yeah.
And then they eventually, like after everything is done and they get the boat off the rock, watch very carefully at the waterfall. It's moving upwards.
So do you know where it was shot? Did you read about this?
No.
So they shot everything on the Amazon except for the end climax. They had to go to the planetarium in LA.
And I do remember seeing that location listed, but yes.
Yeah, so it's all just a pool.
Yeah.
It's all fake, right? You can kind of tell by the light of it is different than the light in the rest of the movie in a way. You can tell it looks like brighter. It definitely looks like a set when you get to that scene.
But the fact that I guess they forgot to shoot the boat getting off the rocks, so they just played the shot backwards, and you can see the water going up the waterfall.
He also has to explain it with it sounds like an RA take, like where they had to lay some voice in. He says, the tree that just fell in the boat knocked it loose. I'm still trying to figure out how that works, but that's what happened.
We're talking Anaconda logic now. I'm going to put these two together because they are kind of a team. Owen Wilson as Gary Dixon and Kari Wuhrer as Denise Kahlberg. How were they for you? I mean, of course, they break the cardinal horror movie rule of if you go into the forest to have sex, you die.
You're going to get killed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the best part of that scene to me is that they go out, they start getting romantic, and then we think it's the Anaconda because we just saw the Anaconda kill a stuffed panther a couple scenes before this. So we're like waiting for another Anaconda attack at this point. But instead, something else comes running at them. You can't see what it is. Cerrone shoots it. He happens to pop out of the woods with his rifle and shoots it. Wild boar. What does he say? Attacks with his tusks, gores with his tusks, goes for the eyes. It's like, do wild boars? And I looked this up for years because wild boars are like, is this really? How would they go for your eye? Do they jump off things at you? I looked it up. Wild boars jump at their prey. They actually lunge at things with their tusks. I don't know how they do that, but I've seen it on video. They lunge at things.
This clearly feels like a script that was written by someone who got a National Geographic magazine and found some interesting facts about snakes and wild boars and said, we put it in the script. It's good.
Yeah.
Make him sound like Inigo Montoya. It's all good.
Sorry, back to Carrie. So Carrie Wuhrer's character has to descend into madness when we see Owen Wilson die. So let's go back to Owen because the whole movie hinges on this moment where Owen Wilson goes from stoner sound guy on a documentary set to armed mercenary who's decided he wants to make a film about poaching snakes, and he's hoping he's going to make $1 million off it. Somehow Cerrone convinces him in 2 scenes with very little dialogue, by the way, to do this convincing. And this guy switches from smoking a doob, trying to f his hot girlfriend to let's go hunt snakes and try to make $1 million. It's hilarious. That is definitely the biggest problem, I think, plot-wise in this film is Owen's change from what he was to what he becomes. It makes no sense.
But once he makes the choice to actually help Cerrone in poaching the snake, there's the looks between him and Denise where it's like, okay, he knows he's doing wrong. And I wish they explored the relationship a bit more. If he was trying to, set them up for a good life together, and that's why they're working on the Amazon and this, then that would make more sense as to why he decided to jump for the money as far as poaching snakes goes.
Yeah, I think me and Jamie talked about this in our podcast too when we reviewed Anaconda. We talked about like there's a scene where they're playing cards, and I thought, what if Owen Wilson has a gambling debt? What if he give us a reason that all of a sudden the money intrigues him? Because at that point, he says in the movie that it's really survival that's intriguing him, because he's saying like, hey, we don't know where we are. We're never going to get out of here alive. This guy knows how to get us out of here. Let's help him, and then we'll get out of here alive. But like, he's not computing a whole lot of problems there. Like, Cerrone cannot be trusted. Cerrone is bringing you to the snake's nest to use as human bait, by the way. Nobody quite knows that yet, but that's what's happening here. And he just doesn't I just felt like his motivational change there didn't make any sense. You're right. If there's something about their relationship that speaks to why we need that money, or, maybe if she's being threatened by Mateo, or she's being threatened by Cerrone, like what if she was the eye candy that Cerrone kept leering at? And so now Owen's kind of putting himself in between them as a way to help defend her in a way, even though it's the backwards logic way. But you're right. Speaking to their relationship, that he steps into between to be like, okay, but if I do this, he'll leave her alone. Yeah, something like that would have helped that make more sense.
Now, there are a lot of death by snakes in this film. Now, Denise, on the other hand, clearly is proof that you can jump up and neck strangle someone from your ass while tied up to, like, what?
Grappling, man. Isn't that where it originated? The grapple fighting style comes from Brazil, doesn't it? That's where we are. So Paul Cerrone is able to, with his hands tied behind a post, jump and slide up the post, bring his legs over her neck, and come back down and strangle her to death with his legs while confessing his sins to her.
Like, that is literally an L2 square X move on a PlayStation game.
It was crazy. Like, it comes out of nowhere. It's wild. And I love it because, like, what a thing like that they make Jon Voight do again too, right? And I just think he just eats that type of shit up. And it's actually pretty brutal death. Of all the deaths, you want to see snakes eat things and squeeze things, but now we've seen two people get crushed to death by the Anaconda, Owen Wilson and Mateo. So this is like a totally new death, which I thought was pretty cool. Like, in a horror movie, you like to have that variety, and I think it's good that we finally confirm, because that's really the first time Cerrone murders somebody, right?
Outright murder somebody. Because up to this point, he basically having the snakes do his bidding, if you will. And at some point, you just have to sit there and say, is he sacrificing these people to the snake? Because he seems to have a real fetish for these snakes kind of thing. He's really into snakes. But at this point, this is the point where you realize that Cerrone is going to do whatever it takes, whoever he has to kill or sacrifice to the snakes in order to be able to catch this snake. Like that's the moment where Cerrone goes full on villain with a Mario jump. It's just so out there. Like, when we covered Rollerball on this show, we made fun of the fact that there was a big giant cartoony boing in the film. This film actually needed that sound effect.
Yeah. I love that it's like they add this new dimension to him, that he's not only a snake hunter, but he's like an expert grapple fighter too, or something.
All I'm going to say is this. The next time you watch Anaconda, watch that scene, and as soon as he jumps up and gets the leg lock on her neck, just hear, here we go, like it's Mario Kart, because that's the only explanation.
He does plant his feet first, like he puts them flat, and then he pulls himself up, but yeah, the physics of it are pretty wild.
Yeah, that right now there's like Bill Nye is looking at this going, that's not happening.
He jumps to her shoulder height, right? Like, imagine she's 5'6" or 5'3". He's got to jump 5 feet high to get his legs around her neck
from his ass. Not happening.
Like, this is a very powerful man.
Vincent Castellanos as Mateo. This is one of those subtle performances, right? And I like the fact that it's subtle. Like, I mean, obviously we find out eventually that he's in cahoots with Cerrone and this was their plan all along. But I like the fact that he's sus, but he's not obvious.
Yeah, he just seems slimy a little bit at first when you're like, it's an acceptable level of slime. But yeah, he's totally sus. He only says about 9 words in this whole thing, which is also like a real economy of acting, because he only has to say like like his biggest line in the movie is when he pulls the wasp, poisonous, deadly from Kale's mouth, and then like one other line before he dies. And Mateo, yeah, he's totally just like making eyes with John Voight here and there, like they're confirming, they're like. And then the other scene I noticed where he's in the background doing some real subtle acting is when they're getting ready to. When they're trying to make a decision about which way down the river they're going to go. And Mateo's kind of pushing them like, hey, I'm just the driver. Which way do you want to go? But you can see in the background, he's kind of looking at Voight as Voight is doing his pitch. And then, you know, this is at the point where now Kale is injured. So J-Lo says, this is the same route you wanted us to go yesterday. Yesterday for different reasons. And so you see like Mateo kind of glance at Cerrone when he does that. So yeah, it's a real subtle performance. And when you see the actor, like he's actually a really legit actor and like, does not sound like Mateo whatsoever. So it's a real like put on to make this character.
But at least it fits him, right? Like John Voight's character, I'm not quite sure if that's fitting anybody. But
who is that man?
Pretty much. But the funny thing is, if you make this movie today, you're swapping roles. Vincent Castellanos is on the mast shooting himself, and Danny Trejo is playing Mateo.
Yeah,
so it's funny how Danny Trejo's star has kind of risen, even though he will take any movie out there. Yep. But he's kind of living his best life, and I kind of like that.
Yeah.
We need to talk about the snake.
Yes, the snake. So like we said, part CGI, and the scenes that are CGI are like when Owen Wilson dies, he's wrapped up and crushed. When Mateo is wrapped up and crushed, and then the other big one I can think of is Westridge, who jumps off the waterfall, and the snake hangs on to a rope. Sorry, not a rope, but like a tree trunk, and dangles itself down like a rope so that it can come back up and catch him and then coil him up back to where it's hanging on. It's a pretty cool effect, but definitely by today's CGI standards, it's pretty rough. The other thing, though, is that half of this thing was animatronic. And they had to build this giant robot that they could control with like a keyboard, basically. And the story I heard, and I saw Ice Cube say this on an interview, was that this thing was thrashing around sometimes. And it would mess up the whole set, like break things. It would go haywire. It had a lot of bugs. And there was a report that it almost hit J-Lo at one point and like seriously injured her and just narrowly missed. So apparently the actors are actually kind of afraid of this robot more so than like, they're not performing fear. They're actually like kind of worried the snake's going to hit them and hurt them.
All I can hear is Steven Spielberg talking about Jaws going, the shark didn't work. Like, I get, and I appreciate the 1997 CGI is not going to hold muster, right? There's a lot of, CGI from that era, and like, you want to see CGI that doesn't hold up, you go back and watch the original Lawnmower Man, because that was so bad. But I mean, it's not horrible.
At the time, this was cutting it. Like this was pretty good. Like this snake, they thought it was pretty good back then. So we have to keep that in mind that like where they were at, this looked good.
Yeah, but I mean, I ask you as the purveyor of all things Anaconda, right? What worked better for you, the animatronic or the CGI?
It's funny you say it because the animatronic works well for the scenes when it breaks through the window and you're looking at its face and it like opens up its mouth and it hisses and it feels very physical. Like you start to feel its size and like you can it has like a haptic, like a texture to it that you feel like you could touch it and you would feel a snake. But then there are other times where they use that. Now, I don't know when they kill the panther, if that's the animatronic or if that's just like some snake they got to wrap around a toy. There's those scenes where like the snake is just a coil and it's not really doing anything. The CGI is like fun to watch, but it has more character in a way, because if you think of the end scene when we've got J-Lo and Cube set up as bait and it comes down from the sky somehow, it definitely has more presence as like a deadly, scary monster. But your eye can't help tell the two apart like your eye tells it apart really easily. So it's really tricky sometimes to decide what you think about this thing. Again, maybe that's one of the reasons I love the movie, because I'm watching Cerrone as the villain more so than the snake. The snake's like a manifestation of evil, but he is the real reason I'm watching it. Like the real evil that I want to see foiled. I don't really care if they kill the snake or not. If they get away from it, I'm just as happy as if they blow it up. But they do have to blow it up.
I think the thing with the snake for me, and it's kind of Cloverfield rules, right? In that we did not see the monster of Cloverfield fully until the end of the film. And that added the mystique and the scariness to the Cloverfield monster. Snakes be all over the place. I mean, I get that we've thrown physics out the window from Cerrone's magical butt jump, but I wish that there's the scene where Owen Wilson and Denise are in the forest and you see that low camera slinking through and you're like, is this a snake? And that part works well. I wish they did that a bit more. And yes, they have the underwater camera that they're shooting people like swimming kind of thing, but
and they did it at the beginning with the panther. And they did it with Trejo's death too. So they actually do that POV quite a bit, but you're right. It's like a lot of monster films. The more you see it, the more you recognize it looks like a doll or it looks not real. We were talking about this with, do you remember the movie Dog Soldiers with those big werewolves?
No, but now I'm fascinated.
Oh, it's a good movie. The werewolves are amazing looking, but they very rarely give you much to look at other than a couple quick glances. And when you finally reveal them, it's like pretty cool, but you do start to realize, oh, it's a costume.
Yeah. I mean, again, like obviously subtlety is out the window with this movie.
Yes.
But I mean, like we actually just talked about Legend on this film, the 1985 film, and the differences between the US theatrical cut and the director's cut, and how in the theatrical cut, you see darkness right away, right? With complete green eyes, green nails, the whole works, right? In the director's cut, you don't see darkness until like an hour plus into the film when we see darkness for the first time that Lily sees darkness. And it's like, okay, there's the mystique, there's the ominousness of it. But you're right. If Cerrone is the villain and the snake is just the tool of the villain, or at least the villain's MacGuffin, if you will, then I guess we don't need a subtle snake.
Yeah, I wonder if it's a little bit of like, we spent all this money on this snake. Show me the goddamn snake. They probably spent a fortune on that animatronic snake and that CGI.
I love that you brought that up. There is a documentary out there called The Final Cut. It's basically a documentary about film editing. And again, Steven Spielberg talking about Jaws.
Yeah.
He has a quote in this where he was going back and forth with the editor of the film, and they were trying to figure out how much of the shark to put in, right? And they would basically like sit there on the moviola as it's going by, and Spielberg would stop the moviola where he thinks it should stop, and the editor would stop. And in some cases it was, pretty much bang on. In other cases it was a frame more or a frame less. And he was trying to get more shark in because, of course, they spent so much time on the boat and so much money on it. And the editor's like, no. If you put more in, it looks like, quote unquote, a giant floating white turd.
Is this Robert Murch, by the way?
No. It was, I can't even remember her name, but she was.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I've heard Murch in his book talk about this, I think. That's why I've heard this story before.
Yeah. By the way, if you want to watch that documentary, and it's a fascinating documentary, you can actually find it on YouTube.
Yeah.
The Final Cut. If you're interested in film editing at all, highly recommend go watch that. And I say that as an editor. Mm-hmm. But it has come time. So, Rob, who is your MVP of Anaconda?
MVP, is it most valuable person? Is that?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, other than the casting director, who probably deserves the MVP for putting this ensemble together.
Ensemble, he says with quotation fingers.
No. I mean, I think this cast is amazing. The more you look at these actors and where they've all gone to now, too, you're like, I can't believe like Owen Wilson's in this movie. Like, so I have to. This again hinges on how you enjoy this film. I enjoy Paul Cerrone's. I enjoy Jon Voight's performance in this. It's so ridiculous. He literally gets eaten by a snake, and they cut to a shot from inside the snake as they're going over his head and swallowing him. He gets spit out 2 minutes later, all gross and slimy, and his face is half dissolved, and he winks at the camera. That's how he goes out in this movie. That's the end of Paul Cerrone, is that moment. And that's exactly what he's doing this whole movie. It's a real kind of wink constantly. And it's a bit of a, I don't know if it's a masterclass in comedy or what it is, but like, how did he realize that his face looked so funny with those leers and sneers he keeps doing in the movie, and that they would have enough weight to let's just cut to a shot of Jon Voight sneering. Like, it's fucking hilarious. And just these lines and the way he lets his eyes like light up like a maniac at different points. And just his lust for the snake it's such a, it's like, here's the other thing I think about, by the way. We were talking about him and Mateo have a master plan. What the was the master plan? Steal? Like, why don't they just steal the boat? Why do they need the crew? I guess because they do want to sacrifice it to the snake to help catch it. Is that why they need the crew to come with them all the way down? Like, it's such a bizarre master plan. Like, what was the A to B to C here? But he does throw the monkey blood all over J-Lo and Ice Cube at the end because he wants to catch the snake. And he thinks he's going to catch it. This is his big plan, is to catch it in a net. He's just going to catch this big snake in a net, and it's going to be fine. This is the biggest snake since the Cretaceous period. And, but, you know, it's just like he steals every scene. And like you said, the other actors don't maybe even realize what he came in to do. But when I saw him, like, even talking about it later as being interviewed, like John Voight, he was laughing about it as well. Like, he knew my plan was to do this big vaudevillian villain, and he felt the script called for that. And it's funny how no one else kind of maybe saw it that way, or at least once they got to I makes me wonder, did the director and the casting director and everybody realize this is where he was going to take Paul Cerrone?
Yeah.
And I think that's why those of us who love Anaconda talk about it as a cult classic, because it's such a strange choice of a performance, but it seems like it's worth the money alone. And then the rest of the movie is still pretty good. And that's kind of like why I like it. It's like I can still follow the plot and still enjoy the like boat ride to hell. But my MVP has got to be John Voight playing Paul Cerrone.
I wonder if John Voight and Luis Loza, the director, were the only two in on the fact that this was a comedy, and basically the winks that he was giving to the camera were basically the winks that he was giving to the director. It's like, no, this is going to be the funny movie, huh?
Well, the story I heard, actually, he's interviewed and he tells about the wink, and he said, I was doing costume and makeup, and they were the only two, and I said a joke to him like, what if I wink at the camera? And they were laughing their asses off, and he didn't tell anyone. He went out to do the scene, and he winked, and those two guys are laughing off set, but no one else knew he was going to do it. And they decided to keep that cut. And I don't know how many times he gets puked out of the snake because it's CGI, so it's hard to tell. And then they cut to his face. And I guess maybe there's other takes where he doesn't wink, but it's so funny that he winks and dies.
I am actually going to call an audible on my MVP, because originally I had Ice Cube written down as my MVP. But you've actually convinced me to change my choice, but not to John Voight.
Okay. Yeah.
It's Jonathan Hyde, who of course plays Warren Westridge. And no, he doesn't make it to the end, but I love the fact that his character, enters the entire scene like Daphne Zuniga in Spaceballs, with all of her luggage, but actually has a full and complete character arc.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, you see, snootiness and conflict and resolution and the denouement, the fact that, when he's finally dead. Like, I am really surprised at how good this, I know we talked about the fact that Tim Curry could have been in this role. I'm glad he wasn't. Jonathan Hyde was perfect in that role.
Jonathan Hyde's death is actually kind of a sacrifice. He's kind of leading the snake away to save his friends by that point. Yeah. So he's gone through the full character arc of being one thing to another.
And it's not an overblown sacrifice. Like, there's a movie where I have to sit here and say, if we ever do Dante's Peak on this film, I'm going to need a Snickers bar when I describe the fact that when the grandmother jumps into the lava to push the boat, it is the most over-the-top self-sacrifice in the history of cinema. This is actually pretty damn good.
I feel like I got to go see it as a meme. I just want the cut of just that moment now, just to see how it looks.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good movie. Don't get me wrong. I like the movie a lot, but that scene needs to go. But Jonathan Hyde, I think, surprisingly, I'm going to say Jonathan Hyde was the better choice over a potential Tim Curry, and that's saying a lot. Rob, I'm going to let you take over the mic for a second here. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Running Scared podcast or Jogcast, and then where we can find it and where can we listen to it?
Yeah, so the Running Scared podcast comes out usually every 2 weeks. We're not the best at hitting the schedule, but we review horror and film and thriller films. We also create what we call Jogcast. They're original audio horror for jogging. So, I mean, a lot of the stories we make ourselves are stories about running. Okay, being chased by zombies or vampires or what have you. So we make those as original content, and then the reviews are just our regular pods. We also have a Patreon account where we do like a kind of a secondary pod, which is more or less just like some of the inside bits we probably didn't put in the first pod. But we've also done some exclusive content where we actually did a pod where we recast Anaconda, and the two of us pitched our two ideas about who should be if we were to do a new Anaconda, or actually we were doing it as if it was Anaconda at the time. And who would you have recast instead? So this list is actually fascinating to me. He took it that way, and I did more of a modern version where I recast it as a musical with Ed Sheeran playing Dr. Kale, and I had Jack Black, I think, as Paul Cerrone, and some other ones. So we definitely took two different bends on that. And Anaconda just happens, it's where our pod started, and it's why we're still talking about it. And as we approach our episode 50, we're going to go back and do Anaconda one more time.
I am trying to picture Anaconda as a musical right now, and I don't know whether I'm more fascinated or frightened by that. Rob, thank you so much for popping on the show. And to you, our listeners, you guys know the drill. If there is a film out there that you think is unfairly maligned or is so bad that there's no way in hell that we can find anything good to say about it, hit us up on Twitter at NotThatBadcast, on Facebook at facebook.com/NotThatBadcast, or over on our website at NotThatBadcast.com. Let us know and we will watch it. We will dissect it and we will find the good things to say, because we're looking for those A grades in B movies. Until next time, I'm Jay, he's Rob. Remember, go listen to Running Scared. You guys are awesome for listening. This is It's Not That Bad. Take care.
Hey folks, Stefan Shirazi and Renee Richardson here from the Metallica Report.
And we are proud members of the Pantheon podcast family, where the best of music and podcasts unite.
We've got something pretty cool for you. We're giving away an exclusive Metallica merch package worth over $250.
That's a whole lot of Scary Guys, Skulls, M72, and other sought-after Metallica swag. And we've made it easy for you to win. Follow and share the Metallica Report, and you're in the game. Go to pantheonpodcast.com/Metallica, enter your email, and hit that button to be entered to win.
And just like that, you're eligible for our monthly exclusive Metallica merch package.
And guess what, rockers? You can enter every month, so just do it. And while we love our global brothers and sisters, the lawyers won't let us ship outside the U.S.